Hi everyone, today I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Ron Anbar, author of The Life Guide for Teens, Harnessing Your Inner Power to Be Healthy, Happy, and Confident. I've read a lot of self-help teen books since I became interested in this subject, but I have to say this is one of the best ones I've ever read. I'm really excited to have Dr. Anbar here today so we can learn more about teenage well-being from his experiences as a physician. Let's get straight into the questions. In your book, in every chapter, you have these tips and tools and strategies that teens can use to better their lives. What are some of the really key ones that you'd want to talk about today?
So the key understanding is that you can help yourself. In other words, if something is bothering you, even if it's an external issue that's stressing you out, you can help yourself. And the way you do that is by applying ways of thinking differently, including hearing your inner self, your inner voice, and orienting your mind in a way that you're going to be successful rather than an obstacle. Let's take some examples. Let's say you have a big exam coming up and you're very nervous that you're going to fail and it'll ruin your career. That kind of thinking just increases your anxiety. So rather than focusing on I might fail and ruin everything, you might say to yourself, I want to succeed and I want everything to turn out well. Now, you might say, well, that's not necessarily going to happen. And I'll tell you that with the right attitude, you are going to do okay. If you think you're going to fail, you're more likely to fail. So like if you're a bowler and you're going to say, oh, I'm going to throw the gutter ball, you're more likely to throw a gutter ball than throw a strike. If you're a golfer and you can say, oh, I'm going to slice the ball and hit the wrong direction, that's more likely to happen. So I work with a lot of athletes, for example. And the truth also of academic pursuits, if you focus on not doing well, that's more likely to happen. That's the first thing to realize. Next, to realize that even in the worst case scenario, you flunk the test, which is very unlikely to happen if you're a devoted student and you care about what you're doing, that can be a learning experience. So if you were to flunk a test, you might ask, what happened? Did I not study? My mind wandered in class? I'm in the wrong subject matter. This is not for me. Did I not pay attention during the test? And do better next time. So if a bad event occurs, it only looks bad on the surface. If you look at it the right way, then you learn something and you're better off. I would much rather deal with someone, if they're a student or a young professional who's dealt with adversity and knows how to get out than somebody who's never had a problem. Some of you may be dealing with helicopter parents. They make sure that everything you do is the right thing. And if you're about to make a mistake, you say, don't do that, you might make a mistake. And that's not a good way of parenting. If you've been a subject to that, you may not know how to handle things yourself so well unless you call your parent. And that's not a great way to live. So if you're a teenager still at home, tell your parents, I need to figure this out by myself. One of the things about my book is that there's a section for parents at the end of each chapter. So you can say, here, this expert in teenagers says, you should let me make my own mistakes because that's how we learn. I like this anecdote. When you were a toddler, you fell many times as you're learning how to walk. Each time you fell was very important because your brain learned this is a way not to walk. So making mistakes and learning from that is part of growing up, learning to become more independent and more self-assured. And the one key to doing well in life is not how smart you are, not how many AP classes you've taken, not how many A's you've received, not your dreams. What's important is perseverance. You stick to what you're doing, and that involves resilience. You know that even when times are tough, you can get through it. If you know that, nothing can stop you. And I've seen that time and time again. So it doesn't matter if you flunk the test. It doesn't matter if you get the university of your choice. It doesn't matter if you want to know if you know what you're going to do when you leave college. I have a radio show of my own where I interview really successful people. I often ask them about their high school experiences in college and how did they decide in their career. And what struck me is that only about a quarter of the very successful people I've interviewed knew what they were doing as they were graduating from college. Most people that I've talked to figured out in the mid-20s. Even I, in medicine, I figured out I want to do counseling and hypnosis therapy when I was 40 years old. And so you don't know. So don't stress about it. Just keep going, persevere. You're smart, you're capable. I know you are because you're paying attention to podcasts like this. You want to learn, you want to improve. You're reading books. You'll get there. I don't know where you're going to go. You don't know where you're going to go, and it's okay. Just know it's going to be all right. So that's the one message. Keep your attitude is really important. You can listen to your inner self. There's techniques you can do that with. We can get into that either in this interview or you can read the book. And the last thing I want you to know is that you need to learn how to believe in yourself and believe this is possible. One way to do that is to imagine the future as you like it to be and how you want your life to unfold, and then point your mind in that direction. Again, I'll give you an athlete example. If you want to throw a strike in bowling, you want to imagine throwing the strike and then doing it. And then don't think too much about the steps. You could think about the steps in preparation for the competition, but when you're actually bowling, just trust your ability. This is true for students as well. So as a student, know where you want to go. You want to become a successful inventor, great. Then you make sure you're taking good classes and have good mentors, and then go for it. Don't second guess yourself. That just gets in your way. Just keep going. You'll get there.
I wanted to ask about hypnosis because I'll be 100% honest. Before I read the book, I thought it was a pseudoscience, but you have so many anecdotes of it helping your patients. So I wanted to know a little bit more about what is hypnosis and how does it work?
Great question. So when I started practicing as a doctor, I would have said the same thing about hypnosis. It's a pseudoscience. It's all fake, whatever. But I began believing in the power of the mind to affect our physical and mental health when I ran into a 17-year-old young man who had very bad food allergies and bad asthma. And one day he came in and he said, when I smell cheeseburgers, I develop asthma attacks. I asked him to imagine eating a cheeseburger, which is something he could not do in real life, and he developed an asthma attack. And I said, stop it. And he did. I said, you're kidding me. No, I couldn't breathe. That was my asthma. I said, whoa, you can think your way into illness? And then the immediate question came to mind, well, if you can think your way in, can you think your way out? And the answer is yes to both. In fact, any person with chronic symptoms, be it medical or psychological, can benefit from learning how to do self-hypnosis. We'll define that in a second. They'll benefit from learning how to regulate their emotions. And sometimes it's curative. So it's a powerful tool, woefully under-recognized, woefully underused. What is hypnosis? Hypnosis is a fancy way of saying using your imagination to help yourself. All hypnosis is self-hypnosis. It's not mind control. It's not sleep. It's not what the movies are showing you. Hollywood likes to dramatize things. Part of it is when people started using hypnosis in the 1800s, they thought there was some magical power with it. The guy who first used it was called Anton Mesmer. That's where we get the word. He thought it was magnetic forces, but it really was the power of suggestion. The guy who studied hypnosis was named James Braid in the late 19th century, and he's the one who named it hypnosis, which means type of sleep. He quickly realized it's not sleep. It may appear to be sleep, but it's not, because people can respond to suggestion even when they appear to be asleep in a hypnotic state. He wanted to rename the entity monoideism, single idea, but that name didn't stick, so we have a misnomer for the name hypnosis. Bottom line, this is something that we can all do. This is something we're in control of, and you can use it to do things such as understand yourself better, calm yourself, deal with pain better, become more creative, become more spiritual. Anything your mind controls can be enhanced by thinking differently. That's what the book is about. That is what the Life Guide for Teens is all about, is how to think differently to improve your life. You could do that without hypnosis too. For example, you can walk out in nature and pay attention to the smells and sounds, sights, and feel of things, and that'll also change how you think and improve how you feel.
So if I close my eyes and I imagine my test going well, is that hypnosis?
Yes, but you don't even have to close your eyes. You imagine that test going well, you're more likely to do well. Now, is it hypnosis? If you're imagining what you could see in your test exam room and what you might hear and smell and feel and taste, I would say that's hypnosis because you engage your whole senses. So hypnosis is changing your mindset, letting conscious control go a bit. When you start imagining things, you sort of let yourself feel how it might have felt in the past or how you'd like to feel in the future. It's not a regular kind of thinking. We usually don't go around imagining things. We stay grounded in this reality. You detach from usual reality or usual way of thinking, and you can do some pretty amazing things with that state of mind.
I really like the one story in the book about the girl who didn't realize why she was having sleep issues until through hypnosis it was revealed that her cat was coming into her room and jumping on the bed. Do you mind giving a quick recap of that for people listening?
Sure. This was a young lady who came to see me for various stressors in her life and anxiety, and she couldn't sleep. She would wake up multiple times a night. I taught her how to calm herself with hypnosis. I taught her how to talk to her inner self, her subconscious, and she got a lot better. She no longer had anxiety. She was able to handle things well in the daytime, but she still said she keeps waking up at night. I said, well, that's strange. Your anxiety seems better. I'm not sure why you're waking up at night. Let's do an experiment. Let's ask your subconscious to help us out. And actually, I asked her to imagine going to sleep, and we had her view it on an imaginary screen. Your job is to watch yourself fall asleep, and before you wake up in the middle of the night, tell me what is in your mind so we can figure out why it is you're waking up. So she said, okay, I see myself falling asleep, and my cat comes into the room and wakes me up, and I throw her off the bed and go back to sleep, and then my cat comes in the room, wakes me up, I throw her off the bed, I go back to sleep. This went on 2 more times, and she comes out of hypnosis. I said, did you realize that your cat was waking up one night? She said, no. I said, well, close the door. And that was the end of her insomnia. The point being that she didn't improve just with relaxation and understanding herself in the daytime. We had to figure out what the real problem was. A lot of people in America, in the Western world, want a solution for their symptom. This is true in medicine. It's true in psychology. I'm depressed. I don't want to be depressed anymore. I have a stomachache. I don't want a stomach anymore. And the medical community accommodates this. Oh, he'll give you a pill for your depression. I'll give you a pill for your stomachache. But they don't stop and ask, why are you having this stomachache? The reason you need to ask that question, the medical doctor will look for physical causes, but will not think about psychological causes. So, the problem with doing it that way is, I might give you a pill for the stomachache. The stomachache will feel better, but I haven't helped you deal with your anxiety that you're going to flunk out of school. And that's why you're having the stomachaches. I once saw a girl who came to me with an eating disorder. She actually came from an eating disorders clinic, which didn't help her. She was brought to me by video from Florida to New York so I could work with her because I'd worked successfully with her brother. I asked the girl, why aren't you eating? She said, my stomach hurts. I said, why does your stomach hurt? Well, it started hurting when my grandmother died. I love my grandmother. I said, oh, so the problem here is you're dealing with your grief, and that's causing a stomach ache, and that makes you not want to eat, and that makes you lose weight. I get that. So I did grief counseling, which you could also do with hypnosis. In this book, The Life Guide for Teens, chapter 18 is all about dealing with sad events. She knew how to cope with her grief. Her stomach ache stopped. Her eating returned. She never had an eating disorder. It was a mislabel by a medical community. I saw another girl recently. She developed anxiety, depression, suicidality, and anger after her father died a couple years ago. And she'd been getting care from the psychological community for a year, not getting better. Well, what did they do for you? Well, the psychiatrist gave me a pill for my depression. Okay. I'm pretty cynical about a lot of healthcare, not just psychologists, for the record. And then, because they treat the symptom, not the problem. And then I did talk therapy. Well, what do they teach you? Well, they talk to me about what's happening day to day at school, and they taught me how to do deep breathing as a way of calming myself, which is true. That's a tool for anxiety. They taught me how to distract myself when I get angry. That's true. That's a tool for dealing with anger. That's in chapter 5, the anger, and in chapter 3 is anxiety. So I talk about these tools. But I said, it's like staring here. Anybody ever talk to you about why bad things happen to good people? No. Anybody talk to you about death? No. Anybody talk to you about the meaning of life? No. I'm asking these questions because this started when her father died. Didn't you address this? This would seem to be the cause, and yet it was avoided for a year. She didn't bring it up because it's uncomfortable. The therapist, I don't know why they didn't go there. To me, that was obvious where you need to go. You got to go at the course. What was really cool about that interaction was that she looked up and she saw a kintsugi plate that's sitting in my office. Kintsugi is a form of Japanese art. They take the pottery that's cracked and repair it by a layer of precious metal, in this case gold. It's beautiful. So she asked me, what is that? And I explained. Then I looked at her and I said, you're like this plate. You feel broken right now, but through this work, you're going to be better than ever. And I could see she was lightening up. Later, I say to her, what do you want to do for a career? She said, I want to become a plastic surgeon. I said, well, that's wonderful. You're going to help other people the way you're going to help yourself. And she lightened up again. And I believe in that 2-minute interaction, she got more therapy with those metaphors than she had for a year. And at that point, all the symptoms stopped. Because you started addressing the core. And then we talked about death and meaning of life in the coming weeks. So, again, healthcare in general, maybe we're driven by pharmaceuticals and the consumers. They want to solve my issue. I have a headache. Give me something for it. And people don't pause and think, why do you have a headache? You have a terrible boss. You're in the wrong major. Figure it out and deal with it. That's, I think, why it's so important to be honest with yourself in order to address the underlying issues.
Yeah, one of the most interesting cases I heard about with something mental causing a physical symptom was in my AP Psych class. My teacher showed us videos of people who had multiple personality disorder and would switch between multiple personalities. And some of these patients, their other personalities had allergies. Their body would break into rashes when they were exposed to a certain substance when they were in one of their personalities and not the other. So that just shows me that there's so much about the mind that we have no idea how it affects the physical body. Industry, there's a very strong division between physical problems and mental problems. And it's time that we start thinking about both when you're having any kind of problem. I know you, in your book, you also talked about the gut-brain connection and things like that. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, the reason we're separated into mind and body is because of a guy named René Descartes, who was a physician philosopher, I think lived in the 16th century, and he wanted to conduct autopsies. The church didn't like that idea too much because they were afraid he would hurt the soul. And he said, I'm just doing autopsies in the body, I'm not touching the soul, that's in the mind. And the church accepted that, and that's why we have mind-body duality. Western medicine, unfortunately, has taken on with that, and they think they're separate. They are not. Eastern traditions treat people a lot more holistically, and in my work, I treat people a lot more holistically because the mind expresses itself through the body, and the body expresses itself through the mind. For example, I just went through a rough week, and I was in bed for 2 or 3 days, which never happens to me. I know why it happened because I know how to talk to my inner self and recognize a sign. I was so overly stressed by everything that's going on in my life that my body says enough. I didn't have the conscious will. I had reasons. I'm a doctor. I want to always help people. I had a hard time not doing that or just taking care of myself. I tell my patients, take care of yourself. I tell the parents, take care of yourselves. I tell the students, make sure you get enough sleep, take care of yourself. Doctors don't necessarily follow their own advice, or it's hard when you think what you're doing is really important, which it is. But I listened, and now I'm going to make changes in my medical career. My body was very clearly giving me a signal, but that signal started with my mind. And since I started resting and made changes, I've noticed changes in my attitude. I'm lighter. I laugh more. I'm quite aware of myself. Most people aren't, but I've learned to listen to myself better. But even I fell into that trap. Mind and body are connected. Respect that. When you get a gut feeling, pay attention. Why am I getting that gut feeling? What is it telling me? When you get sad, pay attention. Why am I getting sad? What's affecting me? And then deal with it. One of the important things is don't ignore symptoms. Don't ignore them. I think Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, big problems always start small. Big problems always start small. So when you see a problem and you figure out what's causing it and fix it, you're preventing a lot of bad outcomes.
I think the idea of big problems always start small is really powerful. Because, big problems always start, I think, as often a small thought in your brain. And people are often very concerned about controlling their actions and behaviors. It's really important that we control how we think, because how you think is how you speak, and how you speak is how you act, and how you act is who you become, which was one of the great messages I loved from your book.
I think that's true, and I think that on college campuses these days, there's a lot of fairly big problems in how we treat each other, which started small. I think it's incumbent upon the students, faculty, and society to deal with these issues. If you believe there's nothing to be done, that becomes your reality. I believe there's always something to be done. You just have to go at it a different way. So I challenge all of you. Some of you may have faced uncomfortable times in college. Look at things in a different way. If we talk about helicopter parents and resilience, I think a lot of college students these days are not particularly resilient. When I hear, you're hurting my feelings, or I need my safe space, I think you don't know how to take care of yourself. You're expecting somebody else to change their behavior to accommodate your needs. I don't think that's a great way to approach life, because life does not accommodate your needs. Life just goes on. It's how you react that will dictate whether you do well or suffer. All of us can do well. All of us can do better. If you start out with the premise there's a possibility, then you're going to keep asking how to do it. One of the basic lessons I teach day one when I meet a new patient is what you say is what happens. So if you say, I can't do it, you're right. You won't be able to do it. If you say, I can do it, you're right, because even if it's hard, if you know you can do it, you're going to keep doing it until you get it done. That idea came from Henry Ford, 100 years old. 100 years ago, he said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. What you say is what happens, because you create that reality. So I encourage all of you listening to this podcast, if you're struggling with something, recognize there's a solution. Keep going, and if you can't figure it out, ask somebody you trust. There's always an answer. If somebody you trust is telling you there's no way to get out of this, they're wrong. There's always a way.
I really like the message in the book about taking more responsibility for yourself and your emotions. It's something that is very personal to me, because in high school I was struggling a lot with compulsive behavior, and one of the things that I would always say in therapy is like, oh, I had to do this because of this. My mom made me feel so sad and things like that. And my therapist told me, don't speak like that anymore. You have to say, I chose to do this. I felt like this. And I realized she's right. At the end of the day, you can shift responsibility onto other people, but you very much choose how you feel and how you act. And that was very scary for me. I had anxiety about making decisions and being responsible for mistakes I made. So I would try to push it onto other people. When I decided to start taking responsibility for how I thought and how I behaved, it was very empowering, because it meant I could do something about the direction of my life. I really like that message from your book. I wish I had read your book when I was younger.
I'm glad you read it now, and hopefully some of your listeners will pick it up sooner rather than later. The fact that you struggled was really good for you, right? You could look back and say, how much I learned from taking responsibility. And the other thing is, when things didn't work out the way you wanted, that was great, because you had to learn to deal with those negative, adverse times. Now you're more resilient. I've talked to patients who have they're dying from their illness. I'm a pulmonologist. I work with kids who were really sick, and I would ask them when they were really sick, I said, if I could wave a magic wand and take away your illness, but it will also take away all the lessons you gained as a result of dealing with your illness, would you make the trade? And virtually all of them refused to make the trade because they appreciate who they've become and they understand their hardships is what helped them get to where they are. So that's a profound message, and I think we should all keep that in mind. If somebody makes me feel bad, nobody can make you feel bad without your permission because you're in control of your emotions. If you use positive talk, if you realize you're in control of how you react, they can't make you feel bad. And that's empowering. You said about anxiety, about getting it wrong. You can't get it wrong. You might not get it the way you want, but you're going to learn from it. And when you start thinking that way, there's much less anxiety.
I think that's a great note to end the episode. Thank you so much for your time and your insights, Dr. Anbar. I really enjoyed talking to you. And for those of you listening who want to learn more about Dr. Anbar, I would highly recommend his book. I will be linking the Amazon link in the description of this podcast. And I'm also going to be giving away one copy of the book for those of you who are interested. Just the first person to email us on notanotherdepressedteen@gmail.com with their mailing address can get the book. So yeah, thank you to all of you listening for supporting Not Another Depressed Teen, and I hope you all learned a lot from this episode and have a great day.